Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up a file that I think is going to feel uncomfortably familiar for a very specific slice of our audience. We're looking at the data on high performers, executives, attorneys, parents who are, objectively crushing it, and yet their physiological markers for fatigue are they're off the charts.
It's the great paradox of the modern professional, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you look at our listener demographics, especially in that tri-state corridor of Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland,
Yeah.
you see this real concentration of people whose resumes look perfect, but their internal battery is just flashing red.
Right. And we're not just talking about being tired after a long day. We're talking about a very specific architecture of exhaustion.
Yes.
I think you know who we're speaking to. Maybe it's you right now. You've read the books on burnout. You've optimized your sleep. You've cut the caffeine. And still, there's this heavy, unfinished feeling. You are still exhausted.
Exactly. And that unfinished feeling, that's the key. Today's deep dive is interesting because we're bridging two very different worlds here. On one hand, we have a stack of clinical research on persistent physical symptoms, or PPS, and the neuroscience of cognitive load. But we're pairing that with a look at the deep insight model from Dr. Edward Jenny and Associates.
It's a dual approach then. We need the hard science to sort of stop the bleeding today, but we also need the depth psychology to figure out why the wound is there in the first place.
Because fatigue is so rarely just about sleep. I mean, if it were, an app would fix it, right?
Yeah.
But this feels more like a soul-level depletion for so many people.
So here's the mission for today. We're going to give you 5 evidence-based, let's call them triage strategies, things you can do literally right now. But then we have to pivot to that deeper work, the unconscious patterns that keep this whole cycle spinning.
But let's start with the definition. I think we need to, because most people use the word fatigue incorrectly.
They really do, and the clinical data makes this huge distinction between sleepiness and fatigue. For a lot of people, I think those are just synonyms.
Right, but clinically, they are completely different mechanisms. Sleepiness is just the propensity to fall asleep. You're in a boring meeting, your eyelids get heavy, you nod off.
Right.
That's sleepiness. That's a sleep debt issue. Simple.
But fatigue is different.
Fatigue is very different. It's a limitation on your capacity to initiate or sustain activity. It's that feeling of having lead in your veins. You might be wide awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, but you just cannot bring yourself to send that email.
That's such a crucial distinction. Because if you treat fatigue with sleepiness interventions, like taking a nap, it often just doesn't work.
We could even backfire. You wake up just as drained, but now you're groggy on top of it.
Right.
And this is where we have to talk about decision fatigue and cognitive load. If you're a high achiever, your brain is constantly running these complex simulations, making micro decisions, predicting outcomes.
And there's this concept in the psych literature you pulled called predictive coding. I want to spend a minute here because this really blew my mind.
It's fascinating neuroscience. Essentially, your brain isn't just a reaction machine. It's a prediction machine. It predicts how much energy you should need based on your own history.
So if for the last 5 years I've been miserable and drained at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday,
Your brain learns that pattern. Exactly.
my brain is basically budgeting for a crash.
Precisely. It's predictive coding. Your brain says, oh, it's Tuesday afternoon. We usually feel threatened and exhausted right now, so let's preload some fatigue chemicals to force a stop.
Yeah.
It does that regardless of what you actually did that morning.
That is wild. It's a protective mechanism that's gone haywire.
It is. And then you layer on the relational aspects. So many of the people we're talking about, these tri-state executives and parents, are living in a state of being wired but tired.
Wired but tired. I feel like that should be on a t-shirt.
It really should. It's the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight system stuck in the on position. You're exhausted, but you can't truly rest because your body feels like it's unsafe to slow down.
So we're stuck in a loop. The brain predicts fatigue, the body stays wired for threat, and we crash. Let's look at how to break it, at least in the short term.
Hooray.
We pulled 5 strategies from the research. These are the triage tools.
And I want to be clear, these are surgical strikes. These are not massive lifestyle overhauls. This is for when you just have to get through the afternoon.
Okay, strategy number 1, the 20-minute cognitive reset. This comes from research on micro breaks. And here's the catch, you have to do them right.
And doing it right is the hard part. I think most people's idea of a break is switching from their work screen to their phone screen.
Right. I'll just check Instagram for 5 minutes.
Yeah, that is not a break. That is
Yeah.
just a different kind of cognitive load. You're still processing, you're still focusing your eyes on a near object. The research suggests you need what's called attention disengagement.
So what does that look like practically?
It's the stop rule. You work for a set time, and then you physically disengage. You look at something distant, out a window, at a tree. You have to engage your panoramic vision.
And there's a specific breathing pattern mentioned in the sources for this reset. It's not just take a deep breath.
No, it's very specific. It's an inhale for a count of 4, and then an exhale for a count of 6 or 8.
Why is the exhale longer?
The longer exhale is the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Biologically, when you inhale, your heart rate speeds up a bit. When you exhale, it slows down. So by extending that exhale, you are physically signaling your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, to kick in. You're manually lowering your cortisol.
You're hacking your own dashboard.
You're telling your body, we are not being chased by a tiger right now.
Okay, strategy number 2. This one is, well, it's counterintuitive, and I think this is the one our listeners are going to resist the most. It's the action first principle, or behavioral activation.
Oh, this is the hardest sell for a tired person. The logic we all live by is, I'll exercise when I have the energy.
Which makes perfect sense. Why would I spend energy I don't have?
But the clinical reality is that motivation follows action, not the other way around. The data overwhelmingly shows that light to moderate physical activity reduces fatigue more than almost any other intervention.
Even more than naps.
In many cases, yes.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about going to a CrossFit class when you're dead on your feet.
No, absolutely not. That would just be more stress.
We're talking about the Helps Today version.
Yeah.
A 10 or 15-minute walk.
Just movement.
Yeah. Think of it as an experiment.
Yeah.
You're not working out. You're just testing a hypothesis.
Right.
If I move for 10 minutes, will my energy shift by just 5%? And usually the answer is yes. It interrupts that whole lethargy loop.
It shakes the snow globe a little bit. Okay, strategy 3 is about auditing your energy. There's this concept from the literature called the energy envelope theory.
This is so crucial for high-functioning people who tend to treat their energy like it's an infinite resource.
Yeah.
Just drink more coffee and keep going. The energy envelope theory says you have a finite number of available energy units each day. If you consistently spend more than you have, you go into debt. And eventually, the bank forecloses.
That's the crash. So the strategy here is to schedule 2 specific types of activities: mastery and pleasure.
Right. This comes from occupational therapy. Mastery is that feeling of accomplishment, clearing the kitchen counter, sending that one scary email. It gives you a little dopamine hit of, I did it.
And pleasure.
Pleasure is purely for enjoyment. Sipping your coffee without multitasking, listening to one song, watching a funny clip. The mistake people make is they fill their days only with obligation. And then they wonder why they feel so drained. You have to balance the drain with the gain.
So it's moving from time management to energy management. You look at your calendar and ask, okay, that meeting is a drain. Where is the fill?
Exactly. If you have 3 high-drain activities in a row, you absolutely need to slot in a mastery or pleasure activity right after.
Strategy 4, strategic boundary setting. Now, we hear about boundaries all the time, but the sources here frame the word no in a very clinical way.
Yes. In this context, saying no isn't a social slight. It's not about being difficult. It is a clinical tool you use to prevent your nervous system from depleting. It's all about cognitive reframing.
Explain that reframe for us.
Well, when we're fatigued, our internal monologue is usually catastrophic. I'm ruined, I can't do this, I'm letting everyone down. That thought itself is exhausting. It takes energy to beat yourself up.
So the reframe is what?
The reframe is something like, I am more tired than usual today, but I can handle one small priority. It's realistic. And you can automate these boundaries with something called habit stacking.
Oh, I love habit stacking.
It's so efficient.
Right.
For example, the rule, no phones in bed. If you rely on willpower every single night, you'll fail because you're tired. But if you stack it, when I brush my teeth, the phone goes on the charger in the other room, you protect your sleep without having to make a decision.
You outsource the willpower to the routine,
Exactly.
which leads perfectly into our 5th strategy, circadian anchoring. This is purely biological.
It is. Light and movement are the main signals your brain uses to know what time it is. If you want to feel alert, you need bright light in your eyes early in the day. But we also need to talk about napping because we touched on it earlier.
Right, the dreaded nap roulette. Will I wake up refreshed or will I not know what year it is?
Now, that feeling is called sleep inertia. The research suggests you have a very specific window for a strategic nap, 10 to 20 minutes.
That seems so short.
It is, but it's designed to restore vigilance without letting you drop into slow-wave deep sleep. Once you hit that deep sleep, usually after about 30 minutes, your brain starts shutting down systems for maintenance. Waking up then is like ripping the power cord out of a computer while it's updating.
So 20 minutes is the hard stop. You have to set an alarm.
Absolutely. And ideally, drink a small coffee right before you lie down. The caffeine takes about 20 minutes to kick in, so you nap for 20 minutes, the caffeine hits, and you wake up ready to go.
The nappuccino. I've heard of that. Okay, so we have our triage kit, micro breaks with long exhales, action first movement, the energy audit, clinical boundaries, and strategic napping. These are all evidence-based ways to get through a Tuesday afternoon.
They are. They absolutely work. But, and here's the pivot, we have to be honest with everyone listening. These are Band-Aids. They're high-quality, medical-grade Band-Aids for sure, but they are still Band-Aids.
And this is where we really need to bring in the relational perspective, because you can do all 5 of these things perfectly. You can hack your dopamine and your cortisol, and you can still feel that unfinished feeling we mentioned at the very top.
That is the feeling we are really targeting today. That sense of, I've done the work, I'm high-functioning, so why do I still feel so disconnected? Why am I stuck in these repeating patterns of burnout?
And that's not a biological glitch.
No, that is an architectural issue. And this brings us to the work of Dr. Edward Jenny and Associates. They're a practice based out of Kennett Square in West Grove, Pennsylvania, and they specialize in exactly this gap. Dr. Jenny has over 29 years of experience, worked with thousands of clients.
And they use something they call the deep insight model. What makes this different from just going to a therapist to vent about your week?
The deep insight model is fascinating because it stops looking at the symptoms and starts looking at the structure of the self. The question isn't how do we fix the fatigue, it's why is the fatigue there? What purpose is it serving?
That's a strange question. What is the fatigue serving? It just feels like it's hurting me.
We tend to see symptoms as enemies. But in depth psychology, symptoms are often solutions. Think about perfectionism or this high-functioning burnout. Often that behavior is driven by some internal pressure that says, if I stop achieving, I am not safe. Or if I am not perfect, I am not worthy of love.
So the fatigue is actually a brake pedal.
Exactly. If your internal drive is pushing you toward a cliff of total collapse, your body creates fatigue to force you to stop. No amount of breathing exercises will fix that because the breathing doesn't address the core belief that you need to be running toward the cliff in the first place.
One thing that stood out to me in the materials is their use of advanced psychological tools, specifically the Rorschach ink blots. I think a lot of people hear ink blots and just think of old movies or pop culture tropes.
It's so wildly misunderstood. But in the hands of a doctoral-level expert, it's an incredibly serious, heavy-duty diagnostic tool.
So why use that instead of just asking questions?
Because high-functioning people, the very people listening to this deep dive, are smart. They are very, very good at talking. They can out-talk most therapists. They can rationalize anything.
Sure.
They know the right answers to the questions.
Tell me about your mother. Oh, she was great. We have a complex but loving relationship. You can script that.
You can absolutely spin a narrative. But you can't fake your perception of an ink blot. It bypasses your conscious defenses. When you look at those ambiguous shapes, your brain has to organize that information. And in doing so, it reveals how you process stress, how you view relationships, how you handle complexity, all without your smart brain getting in the way to sanitize it.
It gets to the truth faster.
Much faster. It reveals the architectural blueprints of your personality.
So the process at Dr. Jenny's practice moves through these 3 phases: consultation, exploration, and then integration.
The consultation is key because they actually listen to your story. They clarify what you want to understand, not just what an insurance code says you have. Then the exploration uses those deep tools, like the Rorschach, to uncover things that regular talk therapy might take years to get to, if ever.
And then integration.
Integration is the real goal. It's about moving from intellectual understanding, knowing you have a problem, to what they call felt peace.
That phrase, felt peace, really stuck with me. It's the difference between reading a menu and actually eating the meal. I can know I have perfectionist tendencies, but just knowing it doesn't make me feel any better.
Correct. And that is what the fatigue is often blocking. We are so busy managing the symptom that we never get to the peace.
I want to touch on something practical about their model because it is distinct. They operate as an out-of-network private pay practice. In a world where everyone's trying to use their insurance card for everything, why is that an advantage?
It's a very fair question. But there are two main reasons, and they are critical for this specific audience. First is privacy. When you use insurance, a clinician must give you a diagnosis.
Right, for the billing code.
And that label, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety, becomes part of your permanent medical record. For many executives or people in sensitive professions, that's liability.
It stays with you.
It does. But second, and I think more importantly, insurance dictates the treatment. It might say, you get 10 sessions for depression. But maybe you're not depressed. Maybe you're navigating a complex existential crisis or high-functioning burnout.
And those don't have simple billing codes.
Exactly. The private model lets the clinicians treat the person, not the code. It shifts the entire dynamic.
It sounds less like patient and doctor and more like a partnership.
Thought partnership is the term I like. You're collaborating with a doctoral-level clinician, someone with serious expertise, to understand your own story. It's an investment in your own operating system.
So let's bring this all together for the listener. We have someone in the tri-state area. They are tired, they are wired, they are feeling that unfinished exhaustion.
The answer is a dual approach. Don't choose between biology and psychology. Do both.
Step 1.
Step 1. Use the 5 strategies we discussed. Use the breathing to lower your cortisol. Use the movement to break the lethargy. Use boundaries to protect your energy. You need to stabilize your nervous system today just to be able to think clearly.
But don't stop there.
Please do not stop there. If you stop there, you're just becoming a more efficient machine. You're just optimizing your own burnout. The goal is to be a more fully alive human.
And that requires the deep insight work.
It requires looking at the architecture that keeps rebuilding the burnout. It requires asking why.
So if you're ready to do that deep work, you can go to www.inkblotdoc.com. You can book a free consultation call right on the site. It's an invitation to reclaim your edge, but in a truly sustainable way.
And really, it's an invitation to look beneath the surface, to stop just coping, and to start truly understanding.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to chew on. We talked about fatigue as an enemy, but you framed it so differently a moment ago.
I did. And I want you to really sit with this question. If you stopped blaming yourself for your fatigue and instead got curious about what it's trying to protect you from, what might you discover?
That is a powerful pivot from enemy to messenger.
Ex-
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Go check out the strategies, check out inkblotdoc.com, and we will see you next time.